A very good afternoon. You're watching the newsroom right here on ET Now. I'm Ajay Sharma. It's a beautiful rally which is panning out right now. Who would have expected a couple of days back that we would gallop above the 9,500 mark so effortlessly? And that's exactly what's panning out, thanks to a lot of short position in the market, which are also covering around the expiry. Interestingly, PSU banks have come back in style. That is one space nobody was paying much attention towards, but is witnessing some eager participation by the traders. 125 points today. We're talking about smart gains coming in from lenders which are badly bruised last couple of days. I'm talking about Bajaj Finance, HDFC Limited. Today is an interesting day because the interest rate sensitives and the so-called defensives, the IT ones, HCL Tech Mahindra, all of them are participating together, and has also got to do with the intensity of selling from FIIs, which seem to have gone down in the last couple of days. But we've been focusing on how India is grappling with the lockdown blues, both on the health front and also on the macro front. And we've been getting you top voices from India Inc. On how government and India will actually work together to crawl back to normalcy in a phased manner. What will it take for the economy, the steps which should be required for us to, repair the damage which has been done due to COVID? Another special voice joining us today on the show is Alpesh Shah. He's managing partner BCG India and is joining me from his home in Mumbai. Alpesh, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining in. COVID clearly has we'll just go to Alpesh in moments. First, we have to take some of the input which are coming as far as the top 10 stories of COVID are concerned, which are running on your screen. Yes, Alpesh is right here with me. I can see you very clearly. Alpesh, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. We've been getting data how COVID actually has impacted the country, both on fatalities front and also on the economic front. What is your sense? You work with companies and sectors across India. How deep has been the damage? Assessment of that, I'm sure, must have been done. You also are working very closely with several companies. What's your sense right now?
So good afternoon, Ajay. As you said, the impact of COVID on companies and the country is actually quite widespread. Interestingly, it's actually very different for different segments and different parts of the economy. So when we look at it, we've actually surveyed a large number of customers across different segments. And we find that there are certain businesses which actually the demand has really spiked up. And we expect that it will likely continue even in the short to medium term. So health services, online media, some of the essential services, you're actually beginning to see that there is a spike in demand. But that's a very small part of the economy. Many others, we actually see that there is a big hit on the demand. And to your point, it's actually quite deep. Whether it is all the automotive, electronics, discretionary spend, even all the luxury items that people typically look at. And so as you start looking at different segments, you're seeing a very wide dispersion of impact. That being said, customers are also now becoming a lot more thoughtful and conservative on where do they really think about spending their money. And that is having an impact on businesses. In addition to the customer mindset, I think you also look at transport and logistics, especially with the lockdown. In spite of all the essential services, support, and so on, there's still a big challenge for companies to actually start either manufacturing or taking goods from the factory all the way to the customer. So I think all in all, a very deep impact on a large part of the business segment. If you look at what companies are doing to try and address this, and it's quite remarkable, I think we have to applaud the resilience of India Inc. in how they've responded to some of these challenges. There are 4 or 5 elements that companies have focused on. In fact, the last month, the companies have typically been taking actions to think about how can they ensure business continuity as well as protect their employees. And they've done very interesting things. So companies have actually started looking at how can they get, in some cases, even get tables and chairs to their employees so that they could work from home. And I think many corporates that I've spoken to, they've actually been surprised with the fact that India Inc. has actually adapted very quickly to this remote working or work from home concept. And how we've actually been able to manage with some disruption, but not really large disruption in how businesses have worked. Once that has become stable, the companies also then started focusing on how do they continue building customer trust and actually continue growing the top line, or at least continue protecting the top line. And here again, you've seen a large amount of innovation, companies coming out with very interesting products, whether it is gyms coming out with online campaigns for their customers, or whether you have niche products. There are companies which have launched really small, 1 rupee sanitizer sachets and so on. Or whether it's manufacturing companies of different products who have actually started realizing that the demand for sanitizers or some other products is large and is increasing. And hence they've actually repurposed their manufacturing facilities to create some of these products. So you're beginning to see a significant shift. People have set up virtual supply chain war rooms so that they can actually get their supply chain and stabilize that. And I guess the last one that people have really focused on is how do you think about an end-to-end digital offering? Right. So going all the way from the customer front end, but also towards manufacturing as well as to delivery. How can you really think about a lot more remote and digital services for customers? Very interesting partnerships coming up. So all in all, like I said, while there has been a deep impact, I actually see a lot of innovation. A large number of companies are looking at how they can address the current situation and at least defend or protect their business while they look for ways and means of growing out of that.
Right. Alpesh, let me come in over there. I want to understand the point which you just made a little more in detail. You also mentioned that in your notes earlier. How would India Inc.'s business models need to be reworked and reinvented going forward as we start moving towards absolute shutdown to partial opening, few facilities and limited operations to get reopened first and then, properly going forward? Talk to us about that.
So I think it's quite interesting, right? Typically, a moment of crisis actually brings out the best out of humans. If I look at history and if I just reflect on that, just take two crises in the last, 60, 70, 80 years, right? How differently the societies had to respond. So if I look at a recent one, if you take 9/11, it completely reshaped travel and security. If you go much further back, and I'll just pick one, if you actually look at World War and World War II specifically, it completely changed society and resulted in a large number of women coming into the workforce. So coming to your question, as I look ahead, not only at the corporate world, but first at society and then in the corporate world, I think COVID is going to have a very large impact on how the society adapts to the new normal, so to say. And I would like to pick on, I think, three things or three elements which I think will completely change as we look ahead. The first one, not surprisingly, is we are all becoming used to the remote ways of working. And whether you call it work from home, whether you call it remote working, whether you call it by any other name, this is something that I think is now here to stay. You would have seen some of the announcements. You have had IT companies making announcements that, they even in the post-COVID world, 75% of the workforce will not work from offices. I have a large number of clients who have actually said that they're going to give up 30 to 40% of their office real estate because they will have at least 30 to 50% of their staff actually either working from home or working from remote locations. And as you look at that, I think that's the second shift that you can see, which is going to be drastically important for the society as well as for corporates. What that means is you can start thinking about virtual workforces, right? They don't have to be in the same location. You don't have to be limited by the belief that everybody has to land up and work from 9 to 6 or 9 to 5. That really opens up a whole plethora of opportunities for corporates to say, can they tap talent which was not possible to tap earlier? For example, if you can actually create a work from home model where people can work 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week for a set of activities and services. Just imagine a large number of people who are staying at home, either the retired or housewives or others. It starts opening up a large amount of opportunities. So I would say that's the first big shift that I look at. Corporates are going to benefit from it, and so will individuals. The second big shift that I see is the whole acceleration of digital. People have all been talking about digital over the last decade now or more. But as you look at the next few years, what COVID has done is it has, in a way, forced people to think of how can they accelerate end-to-end digital.
Right.
Like I said, all the way from reaching out to customers to working with the intermediaries and distributors to manufacturing and
Right.
seeing how can they actually do a lot more tech manufacturing as well. And the last one, if I take the third shift, I think is also coming out with both geopolitics as well as what's possible is the shift in supply chain. So there's been a lot of talk about how people will now start looking at a distributed supply chain, not only focused or concentrated on one or two countries. How do you expand beyond that to more countries? And in fact, a large number of corporates looking to see how they can move it more near shore. To take that shift as well, and I think that's a large opportunity for India to see how can we become a larger part of the global supply chain. So I would say those are three shifts I would like to highlight that I think will really impact both corporate world, but also the individuals in the country.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's clearly one of the big opportunities as well as challenges for India to take bigger footprint in global supply chain as companies want to really move away or diversify out of China. But talk to us, Alpesh, about what kind of challenges do we face right now that we have come to a complete halt at a nation level? Whatever little work is happening thanks to digitization and technology, like the way we are talking right now. How will digitization also play a bigger part going forward in smooth functioning, one, and trying to get back the economy on its feet once again? Talk to us a little more about that, how badly things are, that technology help is inevitable now.
As you said, there is clearly a large impact. And the impact is actually widespread across different sectors. I mentioned that we actually do a survey of a large number of customers. Interestingly, customer confidence is also shaken right now. Right? And so whether you look at different segments, different opportunities, customers are all also withdrawing a bit into the shell to say how can they think about more savings? How can they think about preserving the resources they have for a longer term? Right? And that's true for individuals. It's also true for corporates, because one of the big challenges for corporates is liquidity, is cash, and hence cost. So as you combine this to your point, this is clearly brought the economy to a standstill. The challenge and the opportunity for us ahead is to say how do we first slowly get back to business. As we get back to business, how do we start growth? Get growth back into the economy. First, 2%, 4%, and then as we look at the future, how do we get not only a 2 or 4%, but even larger growth back and take India back to where it belongs? So one of the big opportunities that I see is while there are a large amount of headwinds, India also has, I would say, a few tailwinds with it. So let me highlight a couple of those. So the first is oil prices. While the fall in oil prices has actually been, I would say, challenging for the global economy at large, India being a large importer of oil clearly benefits from the balance of payments point of view. And it gives India the flexibility to be able to invest money into the economy, as the government. The second tailwind, I would say, is the fact that our stock of food is reasonably robust. You combine this, so while there's a lot of headwinds, I think the moment is ripe now for the corporate world as well as the government to look at how do we get the economy back to growth ways. And as you look at it, I think there are 4 or 5 elements that both the corporate world as well as the government will have to focus on. There is a large segment, the daily wage earners or people who are impacted with this. Can we look at, how do we use the direct benefit transfer to actually reach out to these people? You've seen a large amount of support in different geographies coming out to the underprivileged or to the people who are really impacted with the current situation. So I'd say segment one that we'll have to focus on is the segment of retail people or the individuals who have actually been impacted severely by the COVID situation. The second segment is MSME. And this is a really important segment to get right because MSMEs have a larger share of Indian economy than most other economies in the world. The challenge with that is there are 2 parts. How do you keep both the large number of people employed by MSMEs, but also the businesses afloat? And there are two things that are possible. One is, how do we think about liquidity? How does the government work with the financial system to provide liquidity to the MSMEs? And in the short term, as well as looking at how do you make sure that they get support to grow in the medium to long term. The third segment, which we'll have to look at, again, the government can help in a big way in that, is to start looking at infrastructure. And is there a large investment that the government does make in infrastructure to actually kickstart a large amount of the businesses? And that has ancillary benefits where the domino impact is that a large number of support businesses also start growing. And I guess the last one is we'll have to look at how do we increase the confidence across the corporates as well, which have really been impacted. So when you take these four segments, the impacted corporates, infrastructure, MSME, and individuals, I think the single largest element that we will all have to work towards is how do we increase the confidence? What are the confidence building measures? How will individuals come out of their shell and start spending gradually on the right elements that they have to spend on? How will you get the return of migrant labor? That's the other worry that I have. When you start looking at people who've actually moved out of the large cities now, how do we get that migrant labor back? Whether it's for real estate construction, whether it is for projects, whether it is for MSME, whether it's for the retail malls and hotels, you have a large number of migrant labor which has moved out of their current locations. The third is how do you also make sure that you have that whole transportation, logistics, and so on sorted out so that you can support businesses. And then lastly, obviously, the credit support for MSMEs and corporates. So I think that, I would say, is the single largest element. How do we build confidence amongst all the key segments and get the economy back on track?
Right. All right, Alpesh, we'll let you go on that one. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.